Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into all the topics that have got you talking today. Austria, I mean, I have to start with this, come on. The first Western democracy to make the curfew compulsory. Have a medical exemption. Should a government ever force you to have a medical intervention? I bet you can guess my answer to that. And as Tim Payne resigns his Australian cricket captaincy over sending raunchy messages to a woman that wasn't his wife, I wonder how much should what you do in your personal life affect your professional one? And should criminals released from prison on tag have their alcohol consumption measured? All of that to come tonight, but first let's get the news headlines.
Hello, I'm Karen Roberts with the latest headlines. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed that the bomb which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. Detectives are examining the possibility that the motion of the taxi stopping suddenly may have caused the improvised device to detonate prematurely. Police have also spoken to the brother of the bomber. The UK is seeking to ban the group Hamas, designating it a terrorist organisation. The move, if approved by Parliament, would bring British policy in line with the EU and the US. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says Hamas has significant terrorist capability. That includes access to extensive and sophisticated weaponry and terrorist training facilities. Supporters of the Palestinian Islamist group could face up to 10 years in prison. A Hamas official has described the decision as biased towards Israel. During a speech in Washington earlier, the Home Secretary said the group was inherently anti-Semitic.
Hamas has significant terrorist capability, including access to extensive and sophisticated weaponry, as well as terrorist training facilities, and it has long been involved in significant terrorist violence. Hamas is fundamentally and rabidly anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is an enduring evil which I will never tolerate. Jewish people routinely feel unsafe at school, in the streets, when they worship, in their homes and online.
Double child killer Colin Pitchfork has been arrested and recalled to prison just 2 months after his release. It's understood Pitchfork was returned to custody earlier today over a breach of his licence conditions. His re-release will be a matter for the parole board. Pitchfork was jailed for life after raping and strangling 15-year-olds Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth in Leicestershire in 1983 and 1986. The England and Wales Cricket Board say wide-ranging action is needed to tackle discrimination within the sport. Emergency crisis meetings have been held at the Oval in London between the chairs of the 18 first-class counties and other club representatives. But the ECB's chief, Tom Harrison, has insisted he has no plans to leave his role and wants to help cricket address the problem. It follows Azim Rafiq's allegations of institutional racism following his experience at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. An investigation is underway following the deaths of 2 women and 2 children after a house fire in south-east London. Firefighters managed to pull all 4 people from the property in Bexley Heath, but they died at the scene. A man who got out before firefighters arrived was taken to hospital. The fire is not thought to be suspicious. COVID booster jabs have been added to the travel pass. Millions of people who've had 3 doses can now prove their status with the NHS app. It means people can visit countries where vaccinations are only valid for a certain amount of time without having to quarantine. Austria will enter a full national lockdown for at least 10 days from Monday. Unvaccinated citizens were told to stay at home last month, but Chancellor Alexander Schellenberg says nationwide restrictions are now needed to try to contain a 4th wave of COVID cases. Students will have to go back to homeschooling, restaurants will close and cultural events will be cancelled. More British troops are being deployed to Poland's border with Belarus to help tackle the migrant crisis. 100 military engineers will provide practical support and work to reinforce the perimeter. Thousands of people have been gathering along the border in freezing temperatures over the last few weeks. The EU has accused Belarus of deliberately creating the crisis, which Minsk denies. A Croatian lorry driver has been jailed for 6 years for attempting to smuggle cocaine with a street value of £1.6 million into the UK. Predrag Gogic was stopped at Dover's Eastern Docks in May with 20 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside reels of paper. He told officers he planned to take the drugs to Leicester for a payment of €10,000. From next autumn, schools in England will be required to help keep uniform costs down. They'll be instructed to remove unnecessary branded items under new Department for Education guidance. Schools will also have to make sure that second-hand uniforms are available. That's all your news for now. Let's now get back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Cara. Well, with me until 7, my panel, Scarlett Maguire, who's the former Labour advisor, James Woodhousen, who's the visiting professor at London South Bank, and political commentator Andre Walker. Your first time, Andre, welcome.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, and of course, welcome back to you two. I can't believe that they didn't split you up. Fireworks.
We'll try not to hit each other.
Fireworks with these two, always, I can tell you. And you know the drill, don't you? I like to know your thoughts. What is it that you're thinking about everything that we're discussing tonight? And is there anything that we might have missed? You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or on Twitter @Michelle Dewbs or @GBNews. Now let's get straight into our first topic. In news which sent a chill down my spine, at least today, Austria has become the first Western democracy to announce that they'll be making the COVID vaccine compulsory. Yes, you heard that right. All of their adult population who don't have a medical exemption must have the vaccine by February the 1st. It's thought that those who refuse will face fines which could turn into prison sentences if unpaid. Many there are celebrating this news, seeing the unvaccinated as some kind of lepers who basically deserve everything they get. But I want us to take a step back and think, truly think about what is happening. A government basically dictating that its citizens must be injected with something. And let's, of course, remind ourselves that this something has an element of health risk attached to it by way of side effects, which, however rare, surely cannot be deemed irrelevant. And, of course, there's the fact that there's no long-term safety data available. That's before I progress to stating the absolute obvious, which is that the vaccinated still catch and transmit COVID. Now, I get it. Many people are currently afraid or tired of restrictions and just want their life back to normal. Who wouldn't want that? They may see this as the answer. Well, I've had my vaccine, and therefore, so should they. And if they won't have it, make them. But choosing to take a vaccine and effectively being forced into it against your will are two very different things. By all means, the government can educate, provide reassurance to concerns, answers to questions. But forcing a medical intervention, every inch of me opposes this. And even if we don't like it, we must accept that there will be those who choose not to have the vaccine. And surely, when we talk about democracies, surely that is their right. James, your view on this?
Well, I've little to add to your very eloquent exposition there, Michelle. I think the most disturbing thing I read about this was Angela Merkel actually saying she would use every instrument at our disposal. And I think, you know, whatever the measure is, you know there's going to be more of them coming down to restrict democracy, restrict the right to assembly, restrict dissent, keep people in their homes, lock them down, when the evidence for the efficacy of lockdowns is mixed, to say the least. So I think it's a very disturbing development, and I think the only other thing that's disturbing about it is the number of people in this country, as in Austria and elsewhere, who seem to really want to lay down the law to other people in the belief and the knowledge that they uniquely have that they are right and everybody else is wrong. I think it's very illiberal and very dangerous for democracy, actually.
Yeah, and Gary Pennington's been in touch on Twitter. He says, Michelle, please, this is happening in Austria. I'm not interested. There is surely enough going on in this country to worry about, let alone worrying about something that hasn't even happened. Now, Gary, I shall tell you why I'm talking about this, and I'll tell you why I'm talking about it as the top story, because as I've always said, I worry about a slippery slope. You will remember that little sentence about 3 weeks to flatten curbs, and you'll remember conversations that vaccine passports would never be introduced in this country. I worry with COVID, Scarlett, that inch by inch by inch by inch, we have found ourselves into a situation that if you said years ago, 2 years ago to people, fast forward 2 years, you know, you're going to have passports to go to a bar, for example, if you're in Scotland, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that. People wouldn't have believed us. If I'd have said to people, if you don't have your vaccine, you will have to leave your job, people would have said, as Gary is saying now, oh, this is just silly, it's not going to happen. But it is happening, and I genuinely worry that if people don't stand up against this, it'll get worse and worse and worse. Scarlett?
I completely understand what you're saying. I think it's really difficult. If you're in Austria, they've got the lowest vaccine take-up. They've got masses. I mean, you know, tens of thousands of cases a day. We have tens of thousands of cases a day, and we've got 65 million people. They have 9 million. They are really, really worried, and they're trying to see what they can do. And I mean, you know, I mean, here we're going to have we have mandatory vaccines for people working in the care sector and the NHS. I mean, what they're trying to do, I mean, it's how do you avoid the lockdowns? It's how do you try and get a handle on this disease where we know that the people who are dying, the people who are going to hospital with the serious, are the people who aren't vaccinated. I think it's very tough, actually. I think it's a really,
hang
really
on, because
tough
vaccinated people, etc., are dying and going to hospital as well. So I do need to make that.
Very few. Come on.
I do need to make that
very few
clear.
Without serious underlying health conditions. Very few. It is. I mean, the thing about being vaccinated is you're less likely to catch it. You're less likely to give it, and you're much, much less likely to die from it. So,
and therefore, it must be a choice then. If it's all about protecting you in the first instance, you yourself.
Well, it's not, because I mean, what's interesting is somewhere like America has private health, but I mean, somewhere like Austria, everybody's paying for it. So if you taking all the beds, you do
A problem. I'm not even supporting it. I'm just saying I think it's all.
But where is the risk here? The risk comes from the idea of a mandatory medical intervention. We're already in a position now where if the public health authorities believe it's necessary, they can place you under house arrest permanently and you're not allowed to even protest against it. So we've crossed that bridge. Now let's talk about the next one, mandatory medical intervention. At what point does this stop? Now, of course, at the moment we're saying, oh, this should only be for the case of coronavirus. Well, what if it's next winter flu? What if it's anything else? I mean, also, the whole issue of vaccine passports for going into places. Well, let me tell you something. Would you go to a nightclub and say, are you taking pre-exposure prophylactics to protect you from HIV? You might do that, right? This is a slippery slope. And of course, everybody will laugh at me and say, no, this is only related to coronavirus, until it's not only related to coronavirus. And we start checking people for their health status to go into bars. We put people under house arrest when we don't like what's going on in the general health ether. And we force people to have stuff injected or have stuff amputated or whatever it is that's the other medical procedure that some people believe is necessary. I think it's dangerous.
I think it's very, very difficult, right? And
But what's difficult about it?
What's difficult about it is, what do you do if you've got a country where you've got masses and masses of coronavirus, you've got people dying? What do you do? What
do you do if you are the country that produced a political leader where these rules were brought in on prevention of mandatory medical treatment because of what happened in the 1930s and the 1940s? At the end of the day, these rules exist for a very, very important reason, that mandatory medical treatment is wholly unacceptable. The only time it's existed in Europe previously was during the darkest days of Europe's history.
So what do you think about here, where you cannot work in a care home without being vaccinated? And soon in the NHS. No, I mean, if you're.
Well, you've asked me the question, I'll answer.
Right.
The answer very simply is this. Personal protective equipment have always been a part of particular sectors and particular industries. What you are talking about is the general populace, where there is no medical reason particularly for them to have a vaccination, apart from the general issue across the whole of society. That's a different point. At the end of the day, I shouldn't be forced to wear hobnail boots because a guy who works on a building site needs them. That's the point.
But this isn't about that. What this is about is it's how do you stop people catching and giving people coronavirus and getting very ill? It doesn't actually
No, what
matter.
this is about...
whether you're in the NHS. So it's fine if you're a nurse, it's fine if you're a care worker, that you're absolutely happy for those people to have it, right? But somehow the general population, where actually they are quite dangerous, right? You're more likely to get it. You're more likely to be ill from it if you are not vaccinated, and that doesn't matter.
I think if you cannot see the difference between saying that certain people in certain sectors need to have certain protective equipment and the idea of dragging a little old lady down to be forcibly injected with something she doesn't want, if you can't see the difference between that, then that is the actual risk here, isn't it? Because the public, many members of the public, don't see the difference. They love this lockdown.
Andre, just 1 minute. It's in both cases it's a medical intervention, and in one you think it's okay, and in the other you don't. It's not about
just because a surgeon.
It's not PPE, right? In both cases, it's saying you have to have the vaccination. I'm just surprised. I mean, I'm genuinely surprised that you didn't think that what's happening in Britain is the slippery slope. Sorry, James.
Well, I do.
Let's get James in. James.
Well, Austria's failure has been to vaccinate enough people. And that's something that we shouldn't forget. And therefore, you may say the situation is very difficult for them, Scarlett, but the fact is, this is much bigger than just a medical intervention, as Andre likes to frame it. It's about the general accretion of dictatorial and authoritarian powers in relation not just to medicine, but in relation to travel, in relation to green matters, in relation to fossil fuel usage and heating and many other factors in everyday life. The accretion of those powers to government and the freezing out of the electorate from democratic decisions is part of a wider trend, and it's to do with restrictions on freedom of expression, and in very, very violently with this restriction on the unvaccinated. It's not just a medical matter. It's a matter of the elite trying to divide up the population increase the level of fear, increase the level of lockdowns and the infringement on democratic rights, increase the level of intrusion on our private lives, and therefore it's much bigger than just a medical.
But I think
that's the danger to democracy.
I think that is a good point, but I'd go even further than that. I think we are now seeing this culture war where people want to virtue signal, and half of the reason for this, demanding longer lockdowns, demanding mandatory vaccinations, is so that you can say to yourself or your dinner party in Hampstead that you are right on and you're supporting the country.
But this critique of virtue signalling is so shallow by now, don't you think, Gordon? It's been repeated so often. It doesn't explain anything.
I'm afraid I completely disagree. The fact of the matter is that I've seen people time and time again advocate longer lockdowns for no other reason than they just happen to like lockdowns. That says something much more widely about the way we are treating this country.
Well, Andrew, I hate lockdowns, right? I absolutely loathe
Says
lockdowns.
Everyone who supports them.
Well,
give her a moment. Give her a moment.
And actually, I was about to say the reason that I wear a mask whenever I'm on the tube or whatever is because if that's all it takes to stop another lockdown, that's what I'll do. Right? Is of course, yes, when there are lockdowns.
But do you believe that, though, Scarlett? Because people will point to countries that do have mask mandates, that have rising cases. So then when there's a lot of kind of questioning here about, well, actually, are we just trying to chase a goal which is just not achievable, which is everyone's trying to, it feels like they're almost trying to reach 100% vaccination, zero COVID. It's just not achievable. Not everyone is going to want to have this vaccine, and COVID is not going to disappear. So then it's about how do we then manage our way through this?
And actually, Michelle, they've looked at all the evidence and they have found out that the one thing that does work are masks. I'm not saying everybody
I think the science is even out on that.
The science is, and it came out this week.
We shouldn't be dealing with the National COVID Service. What about the backlog?
Indeed.
What about the mental health deficit? What about what's happened with children, or mainly what's not happened with children? Those things need throwing in the balance. You don't have to be a right-wing free marketeer or into cost-benefit analysis to recognise that, there is not one single disease afflicting Britain right now, and it goes a much deeper and wider than COVID.
No, James, the problem is with COVID is that once you get people who are really ill, you have to let them into hospital and they take up the beds for everybody else. It's not like that if you've had COVID and didn't feel great, you were allowed into hospital. No, you had to be really ill to get into hospital. And yes, there's a terrible backlog, right? That's why I'd quite like people to stop catching COVID. There is a terrible backlog. The mental health problems are appalling. I mean, they are. I'm on the board of a small charity, and we've got our waiting lists down for young people, and they've gone up massively during COVID. I know the kick on that COVID has. What I'm saying is I don't want it taking over the hospital so that nobody can do anything.
Right, well, we're going to pause the COVID chat there. Roger, by the way, is tweeting me. You send me this video of yourself often, Roger. There you are. You've got your mask on. You're vaping away there. And as we can see, he's saying, I have to show Scarlett that. There you go. Look at that. He's vaping away, and it is escaping absolutely everywhere. Lots of you getting in touch. Shaz has been in touch saying this whole situation is ridiculous and scary, but how do we stop it from happening? I think talking about the compulsory vaccinations as well, Shaz, what I think needs to happen is that people need to have these conversations. You need to have debate. You need to not just accept these things as though we should just kind of almost sleepwalk into some of the things that are happening. That's my view. Many others, I'm sure, will disagree with me. I'm going to take a quick break. Coming up, should you be punished at work because of your private life? The reason I ask is Australia's Test captain Tim Payne has resigned today because of a so-called sexting scandal. We'll have that and more after the break.
It's been the greatest privilege of my sporting life to lead the Australian men's Test team.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Just a little bit of news that's just happened to update you with in a trial which has divided America, of course. 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse has been found not guilty of attempted homicide after being accused of killing two men and injuring another at a protest in Wisconsin last year. Alice Porter gives the background to the case.
It sounds like something from a Western movie. An armed teenager travelling to a city to allegedly protect it from rioters and shooting 3 people. But that's exactly what happened in August of last year.
And all around here, guys, every building around here has been broken into, looted.
Local officials had declared a state of emergency in the city of Kenosha amid mass protests after a white police officer shot Jacob Blake, a black man. It came just 3 months after a national outcry over the murder of George Floyd. Mr. Rittenhouse, who was 17 at the time, travelled from his home in Illinois carrying a semi-automatic rifle and opened fire on the streets of Kenosha, killing 2 white men and injuring a third.
The shot that killed Mr. Rosenbaum was a shot to the back. The evidence will show that the defendant fled the scene of the dead body of Joseph Rosenbaum without stopping to offer any aid whatsoever.
But Mr. Rittenhouse pleaded not guilty to all charges. He portrayed himself as someone who wanted to protect people and property in the midst of chaos. Mr. Rittenhouse was emotional as he successfully argued that he was the one who was ambushed by several men and acted in self-defense.
That's right, run.
The court also heard from the third man, who Mr. Rittenhouse had shot and injured.
So after you raised your hands like this, you saw the defendant re-rack the weapon?
Correct.
What did you think was going to happen?
So then by re-racking the weapon, I inferred that the defendant wasn't accepting my surrender.
Did you feel that he was going to point the gun and shoot at you again?
Yes.
This case has rested on whether Mr. Rittenhouse was the instigator in a night of bloodshed in Kenosha, or a concerned citizen who came under attack while trying to protect property.
Kyle shot Joseph Rosenbaum to stop a threat to his person. And I'm glad he shot him, because if Joseph Rosenbaum had got that gun, I don't for a minute believe he wouldn't have used it against somebody else. He was irrational and crazy.
The debate surrounding this trial has made its way to the highest levels of US politics. Conservatives embrace Mr. Rittenhouse as a patriot who defended US civil liberties. For liberals, he's the face of a gun culture which is out of control. 500 Army reservists have been placed on standby, and the state governor is calling for peace as today's verdict saw angry scenes outside the courthouse. In a country which prides itself on citizens having the right to defend themselves, Kyle Rittenhouse's case has raised fundamental questions about how far those liberties can extend. Alice Porter, GB News.
Well, let's move on. Australian cricketer Tim Paine has resigned as the country's Test captain because of a sexting scandal. Despite being cleared of any wrongdoing, he stepped down just a few weeks before the Ashes series against England, as messages from the historic investigation were about to be made public. Now,
It's been the greatest privilege of my sporting life to lead the Australian men's Test team. I'm grateful for the support of my teammates and proud of what we've been able to achieve together. For the disappointment I have caused to fans and the entire cricket community, I apologise. I will remain a committed member of the Australian cricket team and look forward with anticipation to what is a huge Ashes tour.
Now, I have to say, watching and listening to that, it made me wonder, when or if, is there a line between your personal life and your professional one? Can it ever be possible to do something in your private life without it having an impact on your professional one? Should you always have to resign if you've done something that some people might perceive as wrong in your personal life? Andre?
Well, I have to say to you, I think the big problem here is mobile phones. In the old days, what would happen is people would get absolutely drunk as a skunk in the evening, and then whatever they'd said would be completely forgotten in the morning. Unfortunately, computers and the internet and emails and text messages mean that these things are never, ever forgotten. Look, I've got to be honest with you. I'm torn by this, simply because I think you have to accept that somebody who is in a position of being the captain of a national sporting team is going to be somebody that people look up to, and there are standards that people will expect that go beyond what strictly they do for a living. But at the same time, I just don't care that somebody sexted somebody. I just don't care that somebody's had an affair. It's not something of any interest to me. And personally, if I were a cricket fan, which I'm not, and if I was Australian, which I'm not, I'd say to myself, I'd rather have the best cricketers on the team than the most virtuous people we can find. And actually, I think sometimes, and I don't want to say that, I don't want to sound like I'm supporting what he's done, but a lot of these people, in order to get into these positions, have to be fairly highly strung. And one would imagine that probably goes through the entirety of their life. And so I bet he's a bit of an intense person in general. And that's probably what you want from the captain of the Australian cricket team.
What do you reckon, Scarlett?
Well, we don't know how much it has been affected. He stood down as captain. He's probably going to be in the Ashes, so he'll probably go on playing for his country, so I don't think that matters. I think it does. I mean, if you think of, a number of MPs have had to step down because of very inappropriate texts that they sent. This guy said he apologised to the woman he sent it to. We don't know, but we might fairly soon, exactly what he said. But, clearly, I'm not even sure he was having an affair. What I don't understand, like you, is why do people do this?
Do you know,
why do they do
Scarlett,
it?
Well, the thing that makes me laugh is, do you remember that Conservative MP, let's not name the one of them, where it was Daddy Bear's running the country now in text messages to people? I was like, oh, please.
And actually, when that came out, and there was another one, I think, who sent a picture of his privates to a woman, and you just thought, why do they do this? A, do they think we find it attractive? But B, you're an MP.
Oh, I can tell you, it's a good job you're not on, well, I assume you're not on online dating sites, Scarlett, because some of the things that people send on there, some of the things that I used to receive, and even on social media, unsolicited, I might add, and I do find it very bizarre sometimes, some of the behaviour of people and what they think is OK. I even, now that I think about it, actually going massively off topic, one of our dear viewers we were talking about emissions, and he messaged into this programme with an intimate picture of himself, which I just found very bizarre.
But this always worries us.
But hang on, because I want to know James's thoughts, because I'm going to give away too many anecdotes and regret it probably. But James, your thoughts on the topic overall?
Well, I'm afraid it was Jeff Bezos's private parts that got exposed.
No, there were quite a few, actually. There is certainly not only
you're
one.
You're obviously tracking it more than me, Scarlett. But I think that it's part of, you've got to set these things in context. Like you, Andre, am I interested in the team captain of Australia's cricket life? bonanza for top team and what he's doing with sexting somebody who isn't his wife? No. Should we be? No. Should he be a role model? No. Should there be a distinction between one's private life, no matter how depraved, whole sexed, for which he was exonerated? But should there be a distinction between private life and public life? Yes. Do we need to preserve that distinction more than ever before? You betcha. Because if we don't, then we'll be turning the clock back to the medieval era where everything was public and nobody had a private life.
Broadening it out, I guess, from sport, because this happens everywhere. This isn't just a cricket thing or a sport thing. Isn't there a case, actually, that if someone does display a complete lack of integrity, if they don't even have enough respect for their own family, then surely that does call into question the integrity of that person. And if the integrity of that person is somewhat lacking, then are they suited to a role in which integrity is required? I'm not talking about sport or cricket or this guy, I'm talking generally.
Well, look, I mean, I think that is an interesting point, and it's kind of, well, look, at the end of the day, are these people competent? Have we overlooked something that's genuinely dangerous? It's often said, by the way, that the Queen had personally nominated a major British sports star, I won't say which one, for a knighthood on the grounds that she felt that his achievements in sport, coupled with the fact he was from a stable family, in a stable relationship, didn't drink, didn't smoke, and was a family man, was something that should be venerated. So part of his appeal was that he then had an affair and she's cancelled the knighthood forever. And in fact, whilst I don't want to defame anybody, you can guess the person who's never got a knighthood but probably would have done. But anyway.
What happened to the old biblical criterion? I mean, I'm an atheist, but, you know, let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Well, that doesn't happen because we have the tabloid press who tell us
Well, no,
all the stones. No, who tell us all the stones. And I do. I think there is a problem. We don't know. I mean, I think if you're having an affair, then you're having an affair, and if it comes out publicly, then one has to choose what to do about it. But what I worry about is the term sexting. Is what exactly was he doing? Who was he sending these things? And I think the fact that he was exonerated. Let's remember, Yorkshire Cricket Club exonerated everybody from racism.
And let's just
not very different. The Australian cricket team is famous for.
And when we're talking about living in the real world, if you want to live in the real world, remember when the guy who said he is without sin cast the first stone was later nailed to a tree for absolutely no reason. So, you know, in reality, in the real world, people will behave badly and people will not accept people who've done things that are actually good in their career.
Well, what do you think? Do you think basically you should be able to do whatever you want in your private life without it affecting your personal life? Or I didn't say you did. I'm asking my viewers what they think. Maybe they might be thinking that you can do that. Or do you think that actually you should be judged and it should impact your professional life? Well, do get in touch, won't you, and let me know your thoughts on that. We're going to take a quick break. When I come back, we'll be looking at when it comes to getting a new job. You get asked that question often, don't you? What did you used to earn, or what do you currently earn at your job? How do you answer that? And are you comfortable when they ask it? The reason that I'm asking you that question is apparently it's a bit of a hindrance to your progress if you do indeed share your current salary. We'll have that story and more after the break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, campaigners have urged employers to stop asking job applicants for their salary history, saying, get this, it discriminates against women, people of colour and people with disabilities, and apparently shores up the gender pay gap too. This is a survey by the Fawcett Society, who's found that asking details about your previous earnings is also unreliable because 4 in 10 working adults have lied about their past salary. Now, before I get into this, I'm going to give you some stats around this. 61% of women who have been asked about salary history say it damaged their confidence to negotiate for better pay. 58% of women said it made them feel like their low past salary was coming back to haunt them. And just a quarter of people feel that pay should be based on past salary. This is compared to 80% of people who feel that pay should be based on their skill and responsibilities, and 77% for the value of the work they do. Scarlett, your views on this?
Well, I think that it's obvious. I don't understand why your past salary should matter at all, actually, because what they should do is you should be applying for a job that's in a salary band, and then you negotiate within that band. And if you want to try and push it higher, I mean, it is shown that men are much, much better. I'm overgeneralising massively, but they are better at negotiating salary. They're more likely to get a higher salary. I mean, if you're all on the same band, the men will be nearer the top. So actually it does. If a woman goes in and she's got a low salary, they'll think, oh, we can get away with this. So I don't see what your last salary has to do with your...
Well, one of the challenges, Scott, a lot of roles are advertised without a salary. So you say, oh, the salary has got this range to that range. A lot of positions actually don't list what the salary is, which I find really bizarre, by the way, because basically you're expecting someone to come and apply for the job, interview for the job, without even at that point knowing what their salary, what the salary for that role is. I've always found that bizarre. James, your thoughts?
Well, I was anticipating Scarlett's great knowledge on these matters. I took the liberty of looking at Office for National Statistics, their latest release on the gender pay gap.
Good, we like a bit of prep.
And 21st of October. And I think the Fawcett Society, in my view, is a very middle-class sort of group of Labour lovies who really do promote the interests of professional women. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I picked up on the ONS account is that it's among professional women and higher paid women in particular where the gender pay gap is at its greatest. Therefore, it's no surprise that people who are earning, say, 90, 120, 150,000 pounds a year are going to be somewhat reticent about talking about their salaries in the past because it could make a big difference, 10, 20, 30,000 in the middle of the dreaded HR interview. I think if you're talking nurses, healthcare workers and others, and the bulk of the female working class in this country, they're much less concerned about talking about their past salaries because they never got very much and they know they're not going to get very much in the future. So, you know, the transparency is neither here nor there for most women workers, I think, who do deserve equal pay and are not fully getting it But just to make it all the discrimination that they suffer still, to the extent that they suffer, it's not down just to a conversation with an HR.
I want to bring Scarlett back in, but just before I do, Andre, your thoughts?
Do you know, I worked for a local council once, and we wanted to cut the costs of government, and we decided to reduce some of the in-work benefits that members of staff got, and one of them was the redundancy package. And I remember our head of HR going, "You'll never attract the best people unless you offer a decent package." I went, "What, for redundancy?"
Oh, yeah.
But look, I think I'm completely with you, Michelle. I've got to say, right, when you look at these adverts online for jobs, now, by the way, I just want to be clear, when Nigel Farage says, "Oh, never had a proper job," that applies to me, right? So I'm only giving this as a general thought rather than any actual experience. But when you look at these jobs, a job that is going to pay $25,000 a year and a job that pays $60,000 a year, it's very hard from these generic job notices to work out the difference between the two. If you're not being told what the salary is, you don't know whether you're completely wasting your time. So it's not about, to me, negotiations. It's about knowing whether you are in the market for that job, whether it's at your level and whether you should be interested in it. And for me, the only way you solve that is for the employers to publish the salaries. But of course they don't, because companies like, I don't know, Unilever don't want to admit how much they're paying their staff because it might be embarrassing to them.
Scarlett, do you want to come back? You look like you did.
Well, I just think for James to sort of talk about force-it, or that it's women on sort of 100,000 or something. There are lots and lots of professional women who are on about 30 between 25 and 35,000, and actually it's for everybody. The thing about nurses, of course, is they are on bands. I mean, if you talk to a nurse, they'll say, "I'm a grade whatever it is," and you know roughly what they're on. I mean, for the public sector, their pay is published.
It is easy.
Right, it's easy. And it's actually, for the professionals, and I've just seen it. Like you, I've never had a proper job. Well, I was a journalist, but I'm not sure that...
I love the way we're all admitting it now.
I know. And don't have to do that. But I mean, it's just really simple. I mean, I absolutely agree. Why can't people publish what they're paying, and then you can go in and know what you're doing? But you shouldn't be discriminated against because you're only earning 25 at the moment, and actually you'd like to go up to 45.
But doesn't discrimination consist of more than something like that? I mean, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be asked of HR departments, and most of it now is done by algorithm, as you will know, Scarlett. And generally, their influence is utterly sinister, I think it's fair to say.
I don't know where everything is a conspiracy to you.
No,
James, the ruling class,
just HR
the elite.
HR departments, the ruling class, the elite. I'm happy with that. Yeah, I think they are in a bit of a conspiracy against the common man. Not a whole one, but a bit of one. They're mostly unconscious, I would say, Scarlett. They're doing it automatically.
Well, one of the things that struck me was those stats I was just reading out a second ago, and the first one was around the levels of confidence that women feel and what it does to their confidence when they're asked about their current salary. And I think that confidence is at the heart of a lot of this, because I think if I was applying for a job, it is, honestly, James, I know you shake your head, but men and women, generalising, before anyone starts getting upset, but generalising between men and women, there is a confidence difference when it comes to applying for jobs, because men, generalising, I feel I need to caveat that, they'll look at a job description and there'll be 10 requirements on this job description. A guy will be able to tick about 4 of them and go, yeah, I'll apply for that. A woman will be able to tick about 8 out of 10 and sit there, often, not always, and go, oh, but I don't have the 2, so I better not do it. So there is a starting position that's different with confidence between men and women. And I do coaching, and I coach women on stuff like this, and I certainly have done a lot of it in the past. And what I would always say to women is that confidence, you have to, when I see a stat like that there that says, oh, when a woman is asked about her current salary, she loses confidence, then I would just say, but that is something that you are in control of. If someone asked me, if I was applying for a job and someone said, well, what do you earn now? I would say something, but actually, I'm not really sure the relevance of that. I'm here to talk about my future. I'm here because I think I'm a good fit to this job. I would like to think that you would think I'm a good fit to your organisation, and it is from there that which we base these conversations. I would state what I wanted, they would state what they're willing to pay me, and then forthwith a negotiation happens. And if I'm not the the right person for them for that salary, then I'll go get another job.
However, and I'm not saying this just because you sat there, you know, I think somebody who does your job is going to be very different from the average person. So I don't disagree with you that if you were to say what you've just said in a job interview, it would work. But I just don't see the majority of people being brave enough to do that.
We need more Michelles in the
Oh, crikey, I think there's more than a few people that would disagree with that, I can tell you that. I think there's a lot of people that would not want more Michelles, less Michelles, I think they'd say. Anyway, let's move on to another story that caught my eye. I was trying to talk about it yesterday, but I think we got so carried away in other topics that we ran out of time, so I thought to myself, I'm going to bring it back. It fascinated me because in a world first, apparently, offenders that have been known to re-offend after drinking will now face alcohol bans. The way this is going to work is they're going to be tagged with devices which monitor the alcohol levels in their sweat. Speaking about alcohol, apparently it plays a part in 39% of all violent crime in the UK, and roughly 20% of offenders supervised by the probation service are classed as having an alcohol problem. This is apparently going to affect, by the way, 12,000 offenders there or thereabouts. Will be wearing these tags over the next 3 years. Are they a good idea, James?
Well, I'm sure you'll think this conspiratorial, Scarlett, but I think it's extremely dangerous and worrying, really. I mean, it's worse than Orwellian. First of all, these tags are not going to work 100% of the time. You know, I study wearables, as they're called, in a civilian context.
Do you?
Yeah.
Get you?
No, they're not clothes.
I know what a wearable is. Right. Wearable technology.
Yes, wearable technology.
Yes, my background is in technology too.
Anyway, they don't work most of the time, and you can be sure that ex-cons are going to get round them rather easily. And more fundamentally, I think the problem is that the category alcohol-fueled crime is not a legal category. You know, a lot of people drink a lot of alcohol, a lot of people commit crimes. The association is fairly loose and it doesn't have any legal status. So the idea that we can nobble 12,000 people who've been in prison with these little tags and therefore get them to do less crime as a result of a little electronic thing is stunningly naive in my view, and it's a technical fix that I will not go along with. There are much better ways, like giving them a proper job and getting them proper skills that could, in a liberal but not stupid fashion, not naive, actually make sure that they do not really.
By the way, just as a side issue, I maintain breathalyzers on mobile phones, so you can't send anyone any messages after you've had more than 5 pints. I think that would be a good thing. The only thing you can do is Uber, I think. Anyway, but look, here's one thing that I find really surprising about this. If you look at cannabis use and its connection to mental illness, and certainly with lowercase in the magistrates' courts, there is definitely a link. Why is it always alcohol we're interested in?
I just told you, because nearly 40% of violent crime.
Because of the violent crime.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book about violent crime, and I was amazed at how many people were drunk. Really, really drunk. I mean, these were the offenders who were saying, I was really drunk, I just thought I was doing this and I killed her, right? I mean, if you look at it, it is really dangerous. And I think, so you come out of jail, they're not talking about doing it forever. You come out of jail and suddenly there's alcohol again. And these are people with an alcohol problem. I think keeping them off alcohol for a while, there is nothing wrong with it. I mean, we send people out of jail with tags.
I will say one thing that's important to bear in mind. And my understanding is if you are on a tag, that's because you've been early released from prison, so that's part of your sentence. So I don't see a civil liberties issue with restricting these people because it's part of the terms and conditions of their early release from a sentence that they legitimately got in court. Therefore, I think do whatever you want. But my point is, I do think that drugs are another important thing, and we're always obsessed with alcohol. I see it, by the way, in terms of conspiracy theory, that we're so determined determined now to have a go at the drinkers. And I feel I must maintain their dignity, pride and freedom.
Right, well, there you go. I'm going to, on that note, the conspiracy theory note, I'm going to move on. Glasgow's hit the headlines, of course, hasn't it, a lot recently, due to COP26, it says here, but I would also say due to things like their bin strikes and their rat infestations and all the rest of it. Nonetheless, It's been in the news a while, Glasgow now, hasn't it? And now it's been in the news again, but for a different reason. Apparently, Glasgow is Scotland's most unhappy city. That's according to a survey. Glasgow's happiness rating was just 5.69 out of 10. That's compared to Scotland's average rating of 6.18. See, this has made me think, if the most unhappy place scores a 5.69, I don't think that's too bad. So therefore, I just wonder what I'm missing. That's only like, if 0 is like you're desperately, desperately unhappy, and 10 is you're ecstatic. Have I got that the right way around?
Yes.
Then being in the middle, I don't really think that's that bad, is it?
But isn't Glasgow a game of two halves? I mean, at one point, I shouldn't laugh at this because it actually is quite serious, but at one point, East Glasgow had a lower life expectancy for men than Kosovo during the Kosovan War, right?
Did it?
Now, that is a pretty severe problem, and it's because of the level of alcohol and drugs and smoking and all that sort of thing that goes on. But I think the rest of Glasgow's a really perfectly nice place.
Scarlett, your thoughts?
I just couldn't live anywhere but London. I mean, for me, London is 9 out of 10, if not more. And anywhere else I've lived, just, I don't want to mention the places, but I was unhappy. I was below 5.
You was below 5. James, what about you?
I just can't believe that we've turned so Jeremy Bentham and utilitarian that we can rate cities down to 5.69 or 6.18, you know, 2 decimal places or whatever it is, right? I've never heard of anything so stupid. It was all pioneered.
I think you might be reading. I think you might be reading a bit too much into my Friday.
No, I'm a numbers guy.
Yeah,
I'm a numbers guy, and it was all got up by David Cameron and his, gross national well-being or something gross like that. You know, in place of GDP.
Happiness index.
Happiness index. And I mean, it's risible, and you know, what Glasgow needs is some decent infrastructure, some proper weather insulation, and an administration different from the SNP. That will make happiness come to Glasgow.
I read one of these reports when I worked for a member of
Is this a short report? Because I need to say goodbye.
The reason I read one of the reports, and the report was we didn't like this town because somebody was pooing on the riverfront. That's like,
honestly, I tell you what.
We were raising the level here.
Yes, right. I'm going to raise the level by reading some of your feedback out very quickly before I go. Trevor says, on the subject of salaries, I always checked out what the salary was before I applied for the job. That's good, Trevor, but very difficult to do if they're not saying what it is. Barbara says, what relevance does my past pay have? Indeed. Peter says, Dewbs role models in sport are sporting role models. They show everyone the best in sporting achievements, but what they do in their personal life is nothing to do with their ability on the field. Alan says, Michelle, just ponder this when you're going on about the vaccine. If the greatest risk was to youngsters, babies and infants, what would your views be then? Well, it's irrelevant, because that's not the case. Anyway, on that, my work is done. Scarlett, James, Andre, thank you for your company. Thank you for yours. Have yourself an awesome weekend, and I shall see you on Monday.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A change in wind direction and a change in weather during the next 24 hours. Mild at first, rain then sinks south. That's associated with a cold front, so colder, brighter weather follows. But the cold front lingering for a time overnight across northern Scotland, bringing some persistent rain here before it finally pushes south across the country through Saturday and Saturday night. And then we open the door to northerlies, much colder but brighter weather following for Sunday itself. Nevertheless, the mild air remains for Friday night. A lot of cloud cover, some breaks in the east, but generally it's cloudy skies and persistent rain there for northern Scotland, pepping up a little bit, I think, during the early hours. A mild night to come once again, perhaps not as mild as it has been, but temperatures still above average for the time of year as we start off the weekend. A lot of cloud in the sky, the cloud thick enough to give some light outbreaks of rain in the west and the south, some hill fog. A wet start though for northern Scotland. That rain then moves through Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland during the late morning, pushing into northern England and North Wales by the afternoon. Mild in the south, colder air follows in the north with some blustery showers, and it's cold enough for some snow over the hills of Scotland in this airflow. But as the, cloud and those outbreaks of rain sink south on Saturday night. That cold air floods south for all of us. And so by the start of Sunday, those temperatures are much lower than they have been during recent mornings. We're looking at a touch of frost for some sheltered spots across the northern half of the UK. But there'll be plenty of brightness in the sky to compensate. Blue skies for many. There will be an area of clouds sinking south into central and southern parts of the UK, and there'll be showers pushing into eastern, northern and some southwestern coasts. But away from those showers, in the sunshine, perfectly pleasant, if a little colder than it has been recently. Plenty of bright weather on Monday, cloudier on Tuesday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.